Okay, so Ross chapter 19, and I'll go ahead and just jot that down here. So Ross chapter 19 deals with a special kind of verb in the Hebrew language called stative verbs. It's actually not special to the Hebrew language. All languages have verbs that are stative, because stative is simply a description of a verb as indicating a state of being, as opposed to an actual activity. All right? So let me just give you an example of some verbs that are stative in English. Most of the time when we translate a stative verb, a verb that's stative in Hebrew, we're going to use a form of to be plus an adjective. But what you have to understand is that these are verbs. They're not adjectives, okay? We already know how to say things like, I am old, right? We just take the pronoun I, we use a zero copula or a null copula, and then we use the adjective old, and that's a way to say I'm old. But there's also a stative verb, to be old, and it would be equivalent to then saying something like I old, right? Or I olded, meaning I grew old, or I became old, or I was old. Now, we don't really say that in English. So in English, we often will translate it as if there was a copula that's being used. But just remember, we're talking about real verb forms here, okay? But in English, we do have some stative verbs that we use. So I could say, for example, well, let's compare the active verb. I jumped, right? You could see me jump, right? I jumped. It's an action verb. It's an activity. You could watch somebody do it. But what if I said something like, I stink? Okay? Can you watch me stink? Is that an action verb? Typically, stinking is not an action verb. Although we kind of are funny and we can use it as an action verb, right? We could say, oh man, somebody was stinking over here. And that's an activity, which is, you know what it means. But if I just say, hey, this stinks, it's a verbal idea, though that it describes a quality or a state of being of the subject, okay? It is stinky when I say it stinks. Now, stative verbs, then, are not activity verbs, and so we have this contrast between active verbs, and some people like to refer to these as dynamic verbs, so active or dynamic verbs, versus verbs that indicate a state of being, an emotional state, a cognitive state, or some other characteristic, quality of some person, okay? And in Hebrew, our vowel patterns for active verbs, you've already learned, are going to be tweaked just a little bit for stative verbs, okay? And here's where the tweaking comes. The tweaking does not come with the vowel under root 1. The tweaking is on the vowel with root 2. So let's take a look at pakad here and compare it to these stative verbs. We'll start with the stative verb to be heavy. To be heavy, kaved. Okay, so if you look at pakad, he appointed. Kaved, he was heavy. Notice that the root 1 vowel is still the same, kametz, kametz. The root 2 vowel, the theme vowel, is the one that's slightly different on stative verbs. Here, I have a sere for my theme vowel. Okay? That's the distinction here in the 3MS form. To be able is the verb yakol. It also has the kametz under root 1. By the way, this yod you're seeing is root 1. It is not a prefix, okay? It's not a nutty prefix. This is the root 1 letter, yod. And root 2 is not a pathak, which is what we have here in the active verb, but it's holem, okay? So generally our two stative theme vowels in the perfect, in the cow, are either sere or holem. Now, I will tell you that the more common one is the sere. That's the one that you need to really park on, Usually the stative theme vowel for the perfect is sere. Occasionally it's holum. There aren't many of those, okay? But the ones that do occur, they happen with some regularity. Yakol being one of them. All right? So, look at what happens. When I add the vocalic ending, kamete, let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. Pakad becomes pakada. So my pathak has reduced to a vocal shava here. Okay? And that happens here as well. So when I want to add a kamete to kaved, my sere is going to reduce to vocal shava there. So when I get to the third feminine singular for she was heavy, by the way, I don't recommend that you say this to anyone. You might get hit. But she was heavy. This, you can't tell that that's a stative verb anymore, can you? Because the sere has disappeared. It's reduced. Okay? Yakol becomes yakala. Same thing. The holum reduced to a vocal shava here. So you don't see the holum anymore. Okay? Now for the 2ms form, we go from pakadta, you man appointed. Kaved becomes kavadta. Same personal ending, same root 1 vowel, and guess what? Even though I started with a sere, when I add my consonantal endings for the rest of the pattern, I get the pathak that I'm accustomed to when it's a sere theme vowel. So good news here, it's going to look very normal. So it is still a stative verb, but it doesn't have a distinct vowel now. So this is really where the action is. Kaved in the 3ms. It's obscured in the 3fs, and it becomes pathak everywhere else. So kaved, kavada, kavadta, kavad, kavadti. Okay? So he was heavy, she was heavy, you were heavy, kavati, I was heavy. Going down, looking at the plural forms, kavadu, they were heavy. Kavatem, kavaten, y'all were heavy. Male and female difference. And then kavadnu, we were heavy. Again, the pathak is under the theme vowel, is the theme vowel here. And for the 3CP, shurik is vocalic, and so I get reduction to vocal shava when the dalet stops closing the syllable and leaves the bet open and pretonic. Get reduced to vocal shava. Okay? With yakol, my forms are yakol, he was able, yakala, she was able, and then when I get to my consonantal endings, look at what I've got. Yakolta. You know how we went to pathak? Sere became pathak with kaved, but over here, holum stays holum with yakol. So yakolta, yakolt, and yakolti. Same personal endings, and holum is the theme vowel for the one that starts with holum up here. So he was able, she was able, you were able, I was able. Looking at the plural forms, yakalu, they were able, yakoltem, yakolten, y'all were able, and yakolnu is we were able. There's one little variation here. We had holums all the way throughout, but remember, tem and ten are heavy endings, and they are going to pull the stress away, which means I had a holum here before. It would have been yakoltem with a holum, but since this is closed and unaccented, Hebrew's cuss rule requires what? Requires a short vowel here. And that's why the holum has reduced to a kametz ketuf. Okay? So please jot that down here. This is, in fact, a kametz ketuf that you're seeing under the kaf. Yekoltem. Yekoltem. All right? So those are your forms in the perfect. Okay, let's take a look at this last form here. So we have looked at the cal perfect of the stative verbs kaved and yakol. Now let's look at malay here. Malay means to be full. To be full. So notice that there's a peculiarity of this verb in that it's got a guttural in root 3 position, and it's not just any old guttural, but it is our beloved aleph, which likes to quiesce. And when it quiesces, it ceases to have consonantal value, and we do not pronounce it. And so, to be full here, to be full in the stative perfect 3ms is male. So it does have the sere that we are looking for stative verbs, as with kaved, male, he was full. That sere will be obscured when we add the comma te for she was full, mal'a, mal'a. So it goes to vocal shiva. And then over here in the 2ms form, when I add the consonantal ending ta, notice that the sere is back. And the aleph has nothing under it because aleph has, like a lousy closer, has quiesced, right? It's trying to close the syllable, loses its consonantal value by quiescing. So maletha. So since the aleph is not being pronounced, the sere precedes the begad kafet letter tav, and so the dagesh lene goes away. All right? So maletha. So that's you were full. Maleth, you woman were full. Malethi, I was full. And then for the plural forms, malu is they were full. Malethem, y'all were full. Malethen, y'all female were full. And malenu, we were full. So that is the stative verb, the cow perfect of 3 guttural verbs, like male. So in the second half of the chart, we have the imperfect forms of cow, active versus stative. And we're only going to contrast pakad, which is active, with kaved, which is stative. Okay? So notice the distinction here. The imperfect is yifkod, he will appoint. Yikbad, he will be heavy. What do you see as the difference here? Well, the prefixes are all the same. The Keurig under the prefixes are all the same. It's only the theme vowel, okay? So do you get the idea here? Stative verbs only differ in terms of their theme vowel, their root 2 vowel, okay? And we had a holem for the active pattern, yifkod. We have a pathak for our stative pattern in the imperfect, yifbad. Now, this is not the first time you have seen a pathak for your theme vowel in the cal imperfect. You've seen it in a form like this. Yishma. Remember that verb? Shama, to hear. The imperfect, he will hear. Yishma. Why was there a pathak there? Because of the guttural, right? When you have a guttural in root 2 or 3, gutturals prefer A-class vowels. And so we have already seen A-class vowels under root 2, the theme vowel, in the past, okay, in chapter 17. But let me ask you, look at yikbad, he will be heavy. Are there any gutturals here in root 2 or 3 in yikbad? No. Bet and dalet are not gutturals. So why is there an A-class vowel under the bet if there's no guttural? It's because that's what stative verbs do, okay? So there's different reasons for the cal imperfect to get an A-class vowel. If it's an active verb but it has gutturals, then it could get an A-class vowel. But if it's stative and there aren't any gutturals, then it could get the same A-class vowel that the gutturals got. All right? So if I'm looking at a verb in the imperfect cal, and there's no gutturals anywhere, but I've got an A-class vowel there under root 2, then it's probably a stative verb. All right? So let me just read the forms now. So yikbad, he will be heavy. Tikbad, she will be heavy. Tikbad, you will be heavy, man. Tikbadi, you will be heavy, woman. Ekbad, I will be heavy. Plural forms. Yikbadu, they will be heavy, and the they is male or mixed they. Tikbadna is they, women will be heavy. Tikbadu, y'all will be heavy, and the y'all is male or mixed. Tikbadna, y'all, women will be heavy, and then nikbad is we will be heavy. So again, all of the same prefixes and suffixes of the imperfect you already know. The difference here is simply a matter of a different theme vowel. Okay, and that's what my box is telling you here on the handout. All right,